I think we can get started now. There'll be some more folks, I think, coming in, Peter, in a bit. But as they come in, we can let them out of the waiting room and right on in. But welcome, everybody. I can see the attendees and recognize a lot of names of folks. And I thank you for coming. I think you're going to find this a very, very interesting evening. I have the pleasure of meeting Peter some time ago and learned of his ambitious flight from Jacksonville, Florida to Sydney, Australia. And Peter is a very experienced ferry pilot. He's done a number of trips, I think over 24 this year alone, but this one is particularly interesting because he's traveling to Australia in an easterly direction. And I think what makes it very interesting to me, as he put it, is that the planning that has gone into this trip is really in many ways the same steps we might take on our own 300-mile cross country in the United States. So I think that a lot of the best practices that we're going to learn about this evening are things that we can take to heart and learn more about. But Piotr Dlugiewicz is a native of Poland, and he is now settled in Jacksonville, Florida, where he has a flight school that he's newly opened called Imagine Flying. You're going to find from his talk, and you'll see on his bio here, that his experience with the Cirrus platform, both the SR and the SF, is very deep indeed, particularly in Europe. A very well-educated man with a master's in psychology and specialty in cognitive psychology, PhD in aviation, and with a specialty in computational intelligence. So clearly qualified to teach, and clearly qualified to ferry a SF-50 Vision jet all the way to Sydney, Australia. So I'd like to turn it over to you, Peter, because you've been planning this for some time, and I know that it's really less of a plan and more of a planning exercise. And unless I've left anything out, let me please turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone from Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. My name is Piotr Dlugiewicz, and first and foremost, I would like to thank you, Billy, for inviting me to speak tonight. I'm very grateful, very excited. Tonight, we are going to dive into the preparation for a nearly 2-week journey from Jacksonville, Florida to Sydney, Australia. And well, this trip involves 9 days of flying with some one-day stops in between. And of course, you may wonder, is it the air the same everywhere? It definitely is. Do the planes fly the same everywhere? They definitely do. But I think a ferry flight like that is, on one hand, is a little bit something different than just a series of cross-country flights. On the other hand, it is very similar to any cross-country flight. So I hope that certain techniques that I'm using to prepare for this flight might be useful, might be simply good ideas to practice in any cross-country flying. Okay, let's dive right in and make the most of our time together. Let me first of all introduce the plane. The plane is Cirrus SF-50. This is the very plane on the picture, the model G2 Plus, which is the currently the latest on the market. It is equipped as any other SF-50 with Garmin Perspective Touch avionics, This is an evolution of the Garmin 3000. And it is equipped with the Williams FJ33-5A engine, developing 1,846 pounds of thrust. When Cirrus was when Cirrus started talking about this plane to the market, it was the end of, well, the 2007, 2008. That the plane was described as the lowest flying and the slowest jet that is going to be on the market. It's actually not flying very slow and not flying very low, but it has certain operating parameters. So what they are, this is flight level 310, so 31,000 feet. The plane is RVSM capable, and just for clarity, let me remind or explain what RVSM is. So RVSM is short for Reduced Vertical Separation Minima. And in simple terms, it is a set of rules that allows planes to fly closer to each other vertically. And in the US National Airspace System, we are talking about the airspace between 29,000 feet and 41,000 feet. So what is needed for that? Actually, advanced autopilot, super accurate altimeter, and total redundancy of the most of the avionics components. To operate in RVSM airspace, we need also a couple of approvals for pilot, for the operator, for the plane. And even if this plane is RVSM capable and actually can be operated in the RVSM airspace in the United States, just because the plane has recently changed its ownership, it does not have all the approvals. So when flying outside the United States, unfortunately, I will be limited to operating below RVSM. Cruising speed of this plane is 310 knots. That translates to Mach 0.53 speed in, let's say, in the terminology that we use in the jet world. And average range is 1,000 nautical miles. I'm giving some general numbers because this is a jet, and like any other type, this type of the plane, it is very susceptible for changes of temperature, density, altitude. So these numbers can differ, but it is generally more or less the values to which we are limited when operating Cirrus SF-50 in most of the cases. Let me introduce you to the route. As Billy mentioned, the flight will go eastbound. I will just explain why in a few seconds. But let's go step by step. On day one, I'm planning to move from my local airport in Jacksonville, Jack's Executive Airport, to Bangor, Maine. This is Bangor is one of two, maybe three, the most popular airports in the northern part of the United States, serving as the first entry to or the last exit from the US when flying cross-Atlantic. Other two will be Burlington, Vermont, and Niagara Falls, New York. On a second day, I'm planning to move from Bangor to Goose Bay, Canada. Goose Bay, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Canada is the place which is a key refueling stop for transatlantic flights that are not able to make it in one hop from States to Europe or from Europe to States. And then the next leg will lead me to Narsarsuaq, Iceland. Narsarsuaq is a small settlement in southern Greenland, surrounded by absolutely stunning fjords and glaciers. And the area was actually a US air base during the World War II. Moving on, day three, 3 legs, pretty intense day for flying, starting early in the morning and heading to Reykjavik, Iceland, Reykjavik is one of two airports in Iceland. The bigger airport used for commercial operations is Keflavik, but Reykjavik is a nice, still international airport of entry. That is the most convenient stop for a quick refueling. From there, another well-known only to ferry pilots destination, which is Wick, Scotland, very small airport in this northeast of Scotland. And from there, we will move to Poznań, Poland. Poznań-Ławica Airport in Poland. Poznań, as such, is one of the oldest Polish cities. But Poznań-Ławica Airport was built in 1913. And it's one of the oldest airports in Poland, and for almost 15 years was my workplace. After one day stop in Poznań, we will move on to a beautiful place in North Macedonia called Ohrid. A very convenient place for refueling, but also very beautiful place. And this is, I would say, a hidden gem in North Macedonia. From there, the same day, moving to Paphos, Cyprus, on the coast of Cyprus. Then following leg, flying day 5 from Cyprus to Braga, Saudi Arabia, and from there to Muscat, Oman. In Muscat, Muscat is, from my research, well, Muscat, of course, is the capital city of Oman, but also it is a city of stunning architecture. And from what I read, the Royal Opera House is a must-see attraction in Oman. So this is part of the plan. The following day, jump over Arabian Sea, over Gulf of Oman to Ahmedabad, India, and further down east to Kolkata, India. The following day, finally, we start going south to Phitsanulok, Thailand, and from there for another night overstay in Kota Baru, Malaysia. Moving on, the refueling stop in Pangkal Pinang in Indonesia. From there, another hop to island of Bali, to Denpasar. From there to Brunei, Australia. And from this point on, we will keep flying upside down from Brunei to Alice Springs and further down to Sydney. So this is entire plan. As you see, it's 9 flying days. With additional 3 stops, that would be 12 days of travel. Hopefully, this is at least the plan. So definitely, well, a couple of totals before I move forward. The total distance along this route is 14,225 nautical miles. I expect to burn 3,000 gallons of fuel and spend approximately 50 hours in the air time. Okay, so one important question, someone can ask, okay, why not westbound? Sorry, why not westbound? Actually, yes, westbound would be a good idea if not. Here we have 2 routes. Option A, that would be the shortest, definitely. The problem with this route is actually it is out of the range of the plane. Actually, reaching Hawaii would not be possible already. So that's not an option. Hawaii is located where I placed this red circle. So unfortunately, this is definitely not possible. There is also an option B that was actually used, as far as I know, once or twice before. But this one is also shorter. It requires 11,000 nautical miles of travel. But again, it's not enough range to reach Japan without landing in Russia. And as we all know, because of war, this is not only a controversial idea, but also this is simply not permitted by FAA, that anybody exercising privileges of FAA certificate will overfly or land except a relatively short list of exemptions in Russia. So these two possibilities actually are not viable anymore. So the only one is actually going eastbound. Okay, as to move forward, I would like to, as a preparation for the flight, I would like to discuss a PAVE checklist. The PAVE checklist is something that I'm sure we all know very well. As a short reminder, this is a tool to assess and manage risks before and during a flight. And the PAVE stands for pilot, aircraft, environment, and external pressures. Basically, you are checking your own fitness to fly, making sure your aircraft is okay, evaluating weather and other environmental factors, and considering any outside pressures that may affect your decision making. So let's go through the PAVE checklist for this flight, and let's start from pilot. There are, of course, several important questions to ask that I should ask myself. Am I qualified for this flight? Am I current? Am I proficient? Well, after long consideration, I would probably say, yes, I am. Yes, I am. I have enough experience, enough qualification in the type. I'm current and proficient. Still, of course, there are several other questions to ask. What factors, even if I'm doing okay, and maybe I'm the right man for the job, what factors may impact my performance? And a couple of things that come to my mind right away is lack of sleep, a lack of proper nutrition, and stress. So let's make a deeper dive into these three. Okay, talking lack of sleep. Well, one of the big challenges of this operation are time zones, right? This is the full list of time zones that this flight will cross, starting from EDT time here in Jacksonville, Florida, and in Bangor, through Greenwich Mean Time in Reykjavik, Central Europe summertime in Poland, and so on and so forth, ending up with Australian Eastern Standard Time. So altogether, there are 14 hours total difference between Jacksonville and Sydney. And even we will be crossing 14 time zones, there will be 15 total changes. So I think there is one valid question: how is that possible that we are flying across 14 time zones and we change the time 15 times, continuously flying eastbound? Actually, there are many interesting irregularities as far as the time zones are concerned. For example, we are very used that the offset is full hour from the UTC time, but it's not always the case. For example, in India, the offset is 5 hours, 30 minutes. That makes different calculations, well, not a nightmare, but definitely complicated. But also, you can see here in Thailand, between Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, there are a couple of interesting things as well. So the airport in Thailand is +7 UTC. Then we move forward to Malaysia, and it's +8. We continue eastbound, not very much, but still eastbound. And the time will come back to +7. And then we continue to Bali, and the time goes to +8. So there will be some couple of extra time changes, and all of them are good reason not to have a very good sleep. So sleep planning is a part of the exercise here, and my approach to it are lazy mornings. by lazy mornings by ferry flights definition, but it means in practice wherever it is possible, except those days with the 3 legs during one day. But in all remaining with 2 legs, I'm planning departure between 9 and 10 a.m., so relatively late. Just because we know that when traveling eastbound, really, it's the problem is to fall asleep and then to wake up. And of course, a couple of healthy sleeping habits like dark room, completely dark room in the hotel, or screen time curfew. This is also quite a good idea. Another topic is nutrition. So it's really important, and well, it's easy explanation for this, because definitely the last thing someone or you wish is a stomach upset when you are 31,000 feet and your nearest restroom is 300 nautical miles away. So I'm very careful with this, and actually, yeah, I should mention that I'm here advertising Bella Vita product, but actually this is something that in fact I use a lot, especially in the morning hours. The reason for that is actually consuming very small volume of food. It gives me quite a bit of energy, because the relatively small package of food is 230 calories. Together with water, allows me to have a good start of a day. And generally, long distance cross country flights like ferries, unfortunately, are not ideal for culinary explorations, especially if someone wants to complete them on time. Okay, moving forward, you know, we all know that there are a couple of obvious stressors that comes to anybody's mind, like fatigue, discomfort, nutrition, or psychological stressors, isolation, and you know, all the pressure because of the decision making and cognitive load, and so on. But actually, there is a set of stressors that are non-obvious, but I would say personally that they have even bigger impact on my performance in this type of operations. This is boredom and lack of stimulation. So it causes, it's caused by monotony of the operation. It reduces vigilance and causes task disengagement. And generally, it reduces motivation as well to do things as they should be done. So at the end of the flight, the natural idea is, oh, maybe I will just skip this checklist, nothing can go wrong. But actually, this is the right moment to do the checklist. So what could be stress mitigation strategies? Task rotation. So doing different tasks and different checks in a different sequence. Some simple mental exercises. A simple mental exercise for pilots could be checking if your avionics is as good in math as you are. So, for example, calculating top of descent point, or verifying if this top of descent point is calculated correctly. Doing breaks, some entertainment, like listening to some music, is obviously helpful. Finally, social interaction. So good co-pilot comes handy. If you don't have a good co-pilot, even occasional brief chats on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over the ocean, they might be also a good idea, whatever keeps us running. But talking about the co-pilot, let me introduce Ines Rosa. Ines is my partner and my co-pilot for this operation. Ines is a commercial pilot herself, commercial instrument rated. So I will have additional pair of eyes and hands on board, which will be extremely helpful. I'm sure Ines has a long list of topics that we should discuss, so I should not have a problem with being busy with talking. Moving forward, aircraft. Well, a couple of things about aircraft. The aircraft right now, actually tomorrow, will come from the annual inspection. So the plane should be as reliable as it is only possible and checked for the operation. It was, to be honest, it was not intentional. Otherwise, I will ask for a thorough inspection, but probably not to the range of annual. But generally, it just happened that the plane was due for it. Of course, talking aircraft, we have to consider range, runway performance, and climb performance, and all the aspects. But generally, detailed pre-trip inspection and all the attention to known issues and careful pre-flight, but also careful post-flight checks. This is something that is tremendously important. And if someone doesn't know a given serial number, in this case, I do know this plane that I'm going to fly. But if someone doesn't know a given serial number, what happens quite often in ferry flights, maintenance stickers can tell you obviously a lot. There is a long list of ferry don't forgets. It starts like any other flight from documents and approvals. However, here in international operations, we have a little bit different list of requirements. And a good example of this special list is the plane cannot operate on the aircraft application registration. We know that this application is good for US operations, but unfortunately not internationally. Luckily, FAA has a special procedure that is called Declaration of International Operation, and these processes can be expedited. RVSM approval limitations must be taken into considerations. Database updates, different geographical areas. I will come to that in a second. Some other don't forget is, of course, a good amount of engine oil and TKS fluid. Actually, this very plane uses TKS only for windshield de-icing and for the radar de-icing. So the consumption of TKS is absolutely minimum. So I'm not worried about that, but definitely engine oil, a couple of cans of engine oil. This is something that must be on board. Finally speaking, databases. Here in the US, we operate with an area named Americas. But when we move forward to cross Atlantic Ocean, I will need a different subscription. It's called International. And luckily, current cycle was just issued today. So generally, the plane will not require changing it during the ferry flight. But this, I believe, the most interesting, though, it's environmental conditions for this flight. And the first thing is water. Actually, water, plenty of water. There will be a couple of legs over water, 2,200 nautical miles over North Atlantic, then 500 nautical miles over Mediterranean Sea, 650 nautical miles over Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea, then additional 450 over Gulf of Thailand, another 350 over Java Sea, and another 600 over Timor Sea. And the temperature of water is very different in different places. The most challenging conditions are, of course, in the area of North Atlantic. In mid-September, the temperature of water is between 37 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit, and I would rather expect it to be closer to the lower number. It's a little bit warmer over in North Sea, and starting from Mediterranean Sea all the way to Australia, the water temperature is okay, but still there is plenty of it. So summarizing, there are 1,700 nautical miles of very cold water, 500 nautical miles of, let's say, cold water, and 2,050 nautical miles of warm water. And that might be a good news, just in case, unfortunately, sharks are of the same opinion that this water is warm enough. So in total, there will be almost 30% of the flight time of a water, that translates into 15 hours of a flight time. So definitely some survival gear is needed. And the things that I'm using routinely is a Winslow ultralight offshore raft. And for all the operations over that cold water, I mean North Atlantic and North Sea, there is an immersion suit. I'm using a Sweet Lake pilot suit. This is something that is supposed to keep you dry, not necessarily warm or not warm at all, but keep you dry in case you get into this cold water. To stay on the water, there is also a constant wear life vest, a good idea. Moving forward, there are a couple of things that I will strongly recommend these days to any pilot. So regardless of operating over the ocean or not. So one of those is fire containment bag. As you know, you will realize, I'm sure, one of the biggest hazards today in today's world is the possibility of cabin fire caused by laptop or iPad, iPhone battery. So this is a critical emergency if you are at 31,000 feet in the middle of Atlantic Ocean, and all of a sudden you experience a thermal runaway of the battery in your personal device. This is absolutely critical emergency. So this fire containment bag is very important. There are a couple of other devices that are useful in case of emergency communications, such as Garmin InReach, for example. Let's have a look at weather as well. So let's compare these two pictures. One is taken, let's say, from the United States, part of the United States. And the other one is actually India, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. I would like to say a couple of words about one of the options that are available in ForeFlight. And from my observations, they are not used very often by general aviation pilots, but they are extremely useful. So this is a color infrared satellite picture or enhanced satellite layer in ForeFlight. They provide information about the altitude of cloud tops based on temperature readings. So this is where it is available in ForeFlight. And actually, they do exactly the same thing. So they show the temperature of top of the clouds. Color infrared satellite is a little bit more detailed, although for the purpose of this presentation, because it's simply a little bit easier in interpretation, I will demonstrate here some calculations with enhanced satellite visualization. So we have two cases, right? We have two cases, and let's have a look at them, and let's see what actually it means. There's this blue patch on the map. How can we say what is the altitude of the top of the clouds? So we can read just by comparing color that the temperature of top of the clouds is minus 54 degrees centigrade. When I took this picture, I checked the local temperature at the local airport was 20 degrees at the elevation of, let's say, 1,200 feet. So total temperature difference is 74. As we know, the standard gradient is 2 degrees of centigrade per 1,000 feet. So we may expect that this vertical extension is 37,000 feet, and adding local elevation, we can expect top of the clouds at 38,000. This is, of course, quite high. It is not possible to fly it over, but let's say any temperatures or any clouds somewhere in the area of 50, they actually may be, let's say, crossable by the airplane like a Vision Jet. But let's move to Asia, to Far East, and we have this picture. So let's do the same thing. So the cloud's temperature, as we can see, is in some places as low as it could only be, minus 83 degrees centigrade. Local temperature 27 at 300 feet. That means that the total temperature difference is 110 degrees centigrade. Again, same standard gradient. And we come to the conclusion that actually the vertical extension of the clouds in the area is 55,000 feet. Actually, we are not even able to say exactly where the top of clouds are, because we have to consider that these clouds are above the tropopause, where actually there is no decrease of temperature with altitude. So we only can say that this is the weather that actually no plane regularly operating, including commercial jets, can actually fly over. And that's why I believe that would be the critical part of the journey weather-wise. But the same technique can be used for evaluation weather here in the United States. Finally, a short look at the airspace. I just give my two favorite examples. The picture on the left is actually airspace in France. Yep, that's quite complicated, as we see. I was personally always avoiding flying even a short leg VFR in France, because for me it was impossible to understand what's going on there. But the situation is also quite complex vertically in Europe. There are different concepts that are not present in the US. Conditional airways, some predefined waypoints to enter or exit terminal areas, or there is a lot of there are very little in-flight route amendments. Instead of that, there is a very complicated flight planning process. And there are also some different ground procedures. Please imagine that, for example, in Europe, you can't just start your engine. You have to ask for startup approval if you fly IFR. So there are several differences in ATC procedures as well. Moving up, external pressures. The last but not least item in our PAVE checklist. So what kind of pressures actually we can experience? That could be private, personal, contractual, and business. Have a brief look at each of them. So private, these are pressures stemming from personal relationships or some social commitments. I think family, our daughter's graduation or wedding would be a perfect example of that. We impose certain pressures on ourselves as well, and they are simply based on our goals and desires, right? Like, for example, reaching personal milestones, reaching certain number of flight hours, or just impress other pilots or our superiors. These kind of pressures are normal and typical. Then we have some contractual pressures. So they arise from contractual obligations, such as deadlines, or some specific deliverables. And of course, we understand all that, but at the end of the day, there are some time-sensitive contract terms that require somewhere keeping that in mind. There might be some penalties for delays or cancellations involved as well. And on the business side, there are some pressures just to fly economically. Think about fuel consumption, for example, because all this in some way has impact on financial performance. And if you do that as part of your business, this is something that you take into consideration as well. So how we can mitigate this kind of pressures? Actually, well, there are a couple of ideas, and this is my approach. Honestly, I allow some extra time pretty much for each segment of flight. For example, I know that well-organized stopover in places like Narsarsuaq or Reykjavik could take 45 minutes. To avoid pressure, I typically plan 90 minutes. And not that I'm going to use it. If everything goes smoothly, there is no need to delay the departure. Sometimes it's nice to be ahead of time, but generally in my game plan, I have 90 minutes for the stopover. To mitigate some other pressures, something that is, in my opinion, a great idea are personal standard operating procedures. So this is my own set of rules. I simply decide that no matter what, I will never land with less than 50 gallons of fuel on board, for example. And as long as I stick to my standard operating procedure, I'm safe. I'm safe. This is what the standard operating procedures or personal SOP is for. If we need to check something or negotiate before the flight, let's do that before the flight, not during the flight, because this is too late. Then we have to stick to the plan. And of course, something that is tremendously important is just setting realistic expectations. As I mentioned, I added a couple of extra days to the plan, and that actually also reduces the pressure. So let's make some summary of all these challenges. What to expect from the flight over 14,000 nautical miles. Plenty of different things, as we spoke already. Fatigue, bad weather, or overwater operations, and some security concerns because you fly in the airspace of countries that are problematic. Of course, aircraft reliability is important. Economical aspects, all this, there are plenty of moving parts, but is this really the most difficult part to harness all these moving parts? Well, let's maybe jump for a second at the end of this at the end of my presentation to the way how we plan in aviation, but also in business and in many other situations. So we have like 3 levels of planning. We have some strategic planning, we have semi-tactical planning, and tactical planning. What it means in a simple words. Strategic planning is all this job that we do long term, right? That involves the decisions well before flight. Some semi-tactical planning is this medium-term planning, like days or hours ahead of flight. And tactical planning is literally what we do in the cockpit. So if I would like to translate this into an example from real aviation life, let's say we have some planning for thunderstorms avoidance. A statement that will represent a strategic plan will be, let's say, I'm planning my flight in the morning because typically convection is stronger in the afternoon and thunderstorms are less likely in the morning. Tactical planning, semi-tactical planning of the same problem will be, okay, I just checked my weather, I'm deciding to go because the weather looks good at the moment, but it seems that I need to keep monitoring my XM weather because there is a chance that some before noon thunderstorms may show up just today. And then in flight, my tactical decision is I'm deciding to divert because my weather radar that is used for tactical weather avoidance tells me that there is no safe way to penetrate. So there will be 3 examples of different planning levels. So how it translates to the challenge of a ferry flight? Well, in the ferry flights, the landscape is replete with variables and potential alternatives. There are a lot of them, a lot of moving parts. However, down the road, different constraints often narrow these tactical choices to simple binary decision: proceed or abort, go or not go. So that's why actually the major part of the work is done in the phase of strategic planning. So you do like 100 different strategic plans, improving them, just to later on to stick to one of these plans, because your chances to make tactical changes could be very, very limited if you decide to overfly this specific country, land in this particular airport. Later changes, if it's not a genuine emergency, could be simply difficult. Let me really, at the end of this presentation, to give you a real life example from my favorite place en route. Actually, probably for every pilot visiting this place often, it's something, well, most of the pictures are taken just there. This is Narsarsuaq Airport in Greenland, south of Greenland. So what is special about this? As you can see, there is elevation almost sea level. And at the sea level airport, on a short final, you have a hill that is 300 feet high. So we have an obstacle on a short final. That causes that the platform altitude on this GPS approach is 3,300, followed by 3.5 degrees glide angle, and the minima for a straight-in approach are 1,800 feet for something. Let me remind it, something that is basically on a sea level. It's as we know, this is pretty high, even for LNAV type of minima. Why is that? Well, this is the answer. This is the answer. Here is the airport, as you can see, and you can see also this hill on the right side. If you want to have a even better and closer look, this is how it looks when you overfly it literally on a short final. So you hope each time you go there and you believe the weather forecast that everything will be fine, but one day you are coming and you see something like that. This is definitely something that you don't want to see. It was my real case. The forecast was talking about 4,000 feet overcast, which is just fine for the entire day. Actually, entire day, the ceiling was 1,000 feet overcast or 900 feet overcast. So it was very, very, very low. So this is an example where actually you make a strategic decision, but then your options to change tactical plan are very limited, because pretty much when you get there and you didn't came back from the mid of Atlantic Ocean and you already made it to here, you are pretty much sentenced to land in those conditions. Finalizing, it happens that the famous pilot, Patty Wagstaff, is my neighbor here in St. Augustine, Florida. I have a couple of chances, thanks to my significant other, I have a couple of chances to meet Patty, even fly with her and meet her on the social level. And what I can say, her office is full of different pictures, posters, and different artifacts from her career. It's literally, the office is full. So she uses every single place, not excluding the restroom, to put another poster or another picture or another quote. And in actually Patty Wagstaff's office restroom, I found this. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. So these are good things. Because we actually can, as I said, narrow down these options that seem to be many. But there's also another aspect, and let me wear my psychologist hat for a brief moment at the end. So one of my favorite topics to discuss with pilots is what we call in psychology, we call it Dunning-Kruger effect. This is basically a cognitive bias. So people who are new to something, they believe they are good at it almost immediately. So after a couple of hours, they just started playing basketball, and actually they believe that, well, LeBron James this is the level that they can achieve if they just want in a couple of extra days, maybe. Experts at the same time believe or think they are not as good as they actually are, or believe that something that they do is can be done by everybody. So there are many important questions to ask ourselves all the time through our career in aviation. Do I really know enough, and how much don't I know, and what don't I know? And the most important one is who knows it and is willing to share this knowledge with me. And I have to say, in my well, being ferry pilot is not my primary career. My primary career is being aviation educator for many years. But in this part of my career, I'm using many different sources, and I'm very lucky to have a couple of colleagues to whom I can call and seek an advice. And I think this is a tremendous thing about community aviation, because community aviation is about having access to people who may know something and who can share this knowledge. So this is really very, very exciting. And once again, I would like to thank all of you for your time tonight. And I would like to invite you to follow us on Community Aviation Instagram and on YouTube. And also, I invite you to visit us on imagineflyingusa.com website. What we do in Imagine Flying is, first of all, we do training. I hope the highest quality boutique, highly customized aviation training, not only in SF50 aspect, but generally everything about instrument rating and technically advanced aircraft is also our domain. If you want to write an email to me, here are my coordinates. Thank you very much, and Billy, back to you.
Good. Thank you, Peter. That was fantastic. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to share this planning with us. I want to point out that that Peter is going to be, he is our newest member of the community aviation community, and we're already planning some, I think, some interesting events and programs with him that we'll be sharing with you soon. I guess what I would like to do at this point is, before we get into, there are a number of questions and answers if you've got, or predominantly questions, Peter, if you have a few minutes that I've been giving, and I can relay these for people, and anybody else that may have some can share their questions, and I can ask on your behalf. But one of the things that we're thinking about is following Peter as he goes about his trip halfway around the world. And I would like to launch a poll to see if you'd be interested in doing that. We would be doing this on Instagram and on YouTube. Peter is, in addition to his life raft and his life vest and his inReach Garmin satellite communicator, he's got his iPhone and he's got a GoPro, and he can share some photography with us as he goes around, and we can post these daily as he makes his way around the world. It looks like pretty overwhelmingly that people would like to do that. So we can share all this with you. I can send out the links to to Instagram and YouTube where we can do that. But Peter is planning on leaving on this coming Sunday, so his departure is well within a week. So that's very exciting. Some questions, Peter, if we may.
Absolutely.
What would you consider at this point to be the most challenging part of the flight? Is there a particular leg that, depending on how you look at it, you either are looking forward to it, or you feel effectively challenged by it more than other legs?
Definitely, and very easily I can I can say that the leg that I was presenting as the part of the representing the most challenging weather, meaning the leg from Kolkata, India to North Thailand, and even more from there, all the way south to Malaysia and Indonesia. This is something that, from my perspective, presents the single most challenging part of this, and this is because of the weather. And the weather over North Atlantic and what to expect in Greenland, this is something that, or Reykjavik, turbulence, windy days, and all this is something that I know quite well already. This part of the trip in Malaysia and Indonesia, I'm observing any possible weather patterns for literally last couple of weeks. And the only pattern is there is no pattern. And that's why it is so difficult. And yep, this is something that I guess will be the most challenging part of this operation. We have extremely intense convective weather. That was a part of my presentation already. The weather systems actually go from east to west in this part of the world, and they all the time they cross the route of the flight from north to south to the south. So that would be something that I believe will be more the most challenging part.
Thank you. How about technically? I mean, we're all accustomed to shooting, let's say, WAS approaches here in the US, but as you make your way halfway across the world going to Sydney, and you are, I would imagine you're IFR all the way in terms of your flight plan. Are there any strange or interesting approaches that involve different equipment, or does everything perform like it does here, or is an ILS whether it's in Indonesia or in Bangor, Maine?
Well, technically speaking, the approaches are the same, and generally speaking, this is part of planning, right? So if you want to select the good airport for this trip, you are looking for several type of approaches, some redundancy, and something bulletproof. However, saying that, there are certain differences in terminology around the world that might be very confusing, that we don't realize them here in the United States. And one example of them, you mentioned the GPS approach. So basically, the rest of the world, following some recommendations from International Civil Aviation Organization, changed the name of the approaches, GPS approaches, to RNP approaches. So we know here in the US, we use the term RNP differently. We actually, by RNP, we refer to a special higher level of sensitivity of approaches that are not flyable by platform like Garmin 1000 or Garmin 3000. And we say here, if you are offered an RNP approach, you have to reject it. Actually, if that would be the case, let's say in Europe, each and every time you are offered a GPS approach, which is just a regular GPS approach to, let's say, LPV minima, that will be presented to you as RNP approach. So there are a lot of differences actually in terminology. At the end of the day, everything is very similar and works the same way, but in many cases, confusion can be caused by different terminology, and that's just one of the examples of that.
Okay, and you didn't have to do any particular modifications or upgrades to, say, the Garmin 3000 to make this trip?
Not at all. Just because, well, one of the things that actually might be considered, but technically is not possible, is having an HF radio that is typically used in transoceanic operations. But this specific route between Goose Bay, Canada, and Narsarsuaq, Greenland, requires minimum altitude of 28,000 feet, which actually I will be flying at to operate the regular VHF radio. So on this specific route, transoceanic North Atlantic procedures allowed using VHF radio. So that would be the only possible modification, actually technically not so possible. For the rest, important thing are just making sure that the plane is equipped with a current and valid database for this portion of flight. So that's this aspect.
And that's just having obviously the right data subscription and having that particular plan.
Absolutely, yeah. This is exactly the most important part, because when landing in Goose Bay, Narsarsuaq, this is the first time we need to change databases to make the leg to Greenland. Greenland is technically a territory of Denmark, so Greenland uses a lot of European procedures, and in the midway to Greenland, you actually change your thinking from inches of mercury to hectopascals that are used in the rest of the world.
Interesting. So you mentioned ForeFlight, and is that going to be your primary tool for, say, filing flight plans as you move across the world?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I found it the most convenient tool, and I have plenty of my customized data also in my ForeFlight. So this is a tool that will definitely allow me to get to Australia. Well, I hope that in the future, ForeFlight will have a full coverage, because these days we have Americas, we have Europe, we have Australia, but actually the services in Asia are limited, so you don't have the full set of information for Asia. This has to be sourced from AIP of different countries, but yes, I'm using ForeFlight.
So I guess the question is, in other words, when you file a flight plan, you're not going to have any problem of it being accepted by any particular part of the world. It's just like we do here. It works in the same way.
That's true. This is correct. However, there are some other technical aspects that are very, say, complex, especially if you want to combine them with flying and with your daily duties. So I have a company that assists me with different permits, landing, overfly. This is a complicated part. So between Cyprus and North Australia, actually, I have a team on the ground that I can call from the deck, from the plane, and ask to assist me with anything I need. And this is simply more convenient way of doing those things.
Any concerns about a lack of connectivity in certain places with either Wi-Fi or cell?
Actually, the only connectivity issues are certain parts over the water.
Mhm.
And again, North Atlantic is a good example of it. Even if theoretically at flight level 280, VHF frequency should allow for the communication all along this route. In practice, it is not the case, and depends on many other factors. But in many cases, you are simply flying without any radio communication. It's also out of the radar coverage, so you have different procedures. We are very much, when we fly in the United States, we are pretty much all the time within the radar coverage of ATC, well, with some very little exceptions. This is not the case in transatlantic operations, so there are good portions of flight where you are out of radar, and actually all the control is provided in the manner that it is called procedural control. So all the decisions that are and the clearances given by ATC are based on the pilot's positional reports. But this is kind of a standard in this operations. Other than that, the plane has a satellite communication, so I don't expect any issues with contacting anybody anytime.
And you mentioned again, the basic equipment that you're bringing, even your sort of breakfast crackers and the water and so forth. One question was, what other kind of snacks and food do you carry with you on the plane or in general? I mean, as you go across.
Not actually. There is not a big variety, I have to say. I'm very conservative with that, and I know that, for example, fruits. This is something less than ideal in some situations. So especially this first two days where you have or 3 days when you have literally 0 options to land in case of any medical problems, any stomach upset cases, you literally have no choice. Especially in the first 3 days, I'm super conservative with this, and I can imagine that someone can have like a bigger variety, but still I recommend for the long cross-country flights to be conservative with this. So and of course, when you travel to India, for example, having own water, especially in some places like the airport, or not drinking from, let's say, not labeled bottle or can of water is something advisable for the same reason.
Right. And how do you, in your to stay rested, do you set your mental clock as you move, or do you stay on Jacksonville time as you move? How do you adjust your body and your mind?
Actually, as we know, person's ability to adjust to the time changes is approximately 2 to 3 hours per day. Mm-hmm. This is maximum, right? So if we travel eastbound, actually jet lag typically it takes 2 to 3 days just to adjust 6 to 9 hours, depending whether we travel, let's say, to Europe from the East Coast or from the West Coast. Here, luckily, this part is this each day actually represents like 2 hours change. So this is something doable, and the simple strategy of the lazy morning and like 10 a.m. departure when you can allow yourself for it. This is typically sufficient. Another problem, it's not this time of the year, But another bigger problem is actually adjustment to daylight. It's important to take into consideration that the day in Greenland in winter, I did a couple of flights, a couple of ferries in December, in January. So imagine that the sunrise in early January is 9:40 a.m. and sunset is around 2 o'clock. 2:40 if I'm not mistaken. So the day is incredibly short. And one of the strategies here is, my strategies is never ever fly over the ocean with one engine at night, because even theoretically emergency evacuation is then impossible. So in such cases, you have super narrow windows, the window of opportunity to move, to hop, if you really want to stick to your SOP. And my SOP, never operate single engine over water at night. In summer though, in June, let's say in Reykjavik, it's really very difficult to sleep because the night is only 1 hour or so. So I'm very careful in planning my hotel stays to make sure that I will be able to make really room completely dark, because really you cannot sleep just because of the day, which is all day long, actually, the sunlight all day long.
Wow. Okay. And redundancy wise, are you carrying like a couple of extra iPads? I mean, how do you, if something
Yes.
were to happen? Okay.
Yes, actually, each of those things is redundant. And this is also thanks to my co-pilot. It doesn't require any additional effort because both of us, we have the same set of equipment, right? So we have this redundancy in a natural way. But once again, I would like to say that I personally believe that with all this technology we carry, being ready for in-flight cabin fire these days is something that should be treated extremely seriously, not only when you fly over a big body of water, but wherever you fly these days, just because we have so much equipment and really something can go wrong, especially if like in Cirrus's in this plane, you have fantastic huge windows, but it means also that you have a lot of sun radiation, and overheating your devices is very simple.
I bet. Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions. If you do have some, folks, put them in. I think, that really wraps it up. That was a fantastic presentation. And we'll be following you as you go. So as you share the media with us, we'll post it, and we will track you, follow you, and wish you good luck as you head to Sydney, Australia. Thank
you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your attention tonight. And yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And this is being recorded, and you will be able to have access to it and watch it again. But Peter, thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Good night and good luck.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.